Hi, I'm Daniel Reeve, and today we're going to be talking about inspiratory muscle warm-ups. First of all, we're going to talk about whole body warm-ups and why you do them. We're then going to look at the inspiratory muscles and how you warm them up. We'll then look at some research into the effectiveness of an inspiratory warm-up before we summarise at the end of the video.
First one we're going to look at are full body warm-ups. The purpose of these is to improve the dynamics of a muscle and prepare the athlete for the demands of the exercise they're going to take part in. This could either be passive, such as a shower or a bath, or active, which can be general, such as a jog or a cycle, or specific, such as a passing drill. Some of the benefits associated with a warm-up are an increase in muscle temperature, an increase in speed of nerve transmission, increased contraction speed, and a paper by Safran et al. Found that warm-ups are associated with injury prevention. We're now going to look at inspiratory muscles. This diagram has all the respiratory muscles on, and the inspiratory muscles associated with this are the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the scalene muscles, the external intercostal muscles, and the internal intercostal muscles. The reason these are important are due to findings by Harms et al., which found that the work of breathing incurred during exercise has a significant influence on exercise performance, meaning fatiguing these muscles could be potentially detrimental to performance. We're now going to look at how you warm up the inspiratory muscles. A common method is with the use of a power breathe as shown in the image. This is completed at residual volume, which means emptying the lungs to their full capacity, and then completing 2 lots of 30 maximal breaths with a 2-minute rest in between each set. This is completed at 40% of maximum respiratory pressure, which is a measure of respiratory strength.
As previously discussed, one way of completing an inspiratory muscle warm-up is with the use of a power breathe. So Todd's just going to give us an example. So what he's going to do is empty his lungs first, so the warm-up's completed at residual volume, and then complete 2 lots of 30 breaths with a 2-minute rest in between. How does that feel, Todd?
We're now going to go on to look at papers in the research area. First paper we'll look at is by Tong and Fu from 2006. The aim of their paper was to examine the effects of inspiratory muscle warm-ups on the maximum dynamic inspiratory muscle function and the maximum repetitions of a 20-metre shuttle run in the yo-yo intermittent recovery test. 10 healthy males were used within the test, and they completed a yo-yo test following one of 3 conditions: the control condition, where there was no inspiratory muscle warm-up; the placebo condition, where they completed a warm-up and then a 15% MIP inspiratory muscle warm-up; and the inspiratory muscle warm-up group, where the warm-up was completed alongside a 40% MIP inspiratory muscle warm-up. The warm-up consisted of 5 minutes self-selected speed on a treadmill, 10 minutes of self-selected stretching, followed by 5 minutes ground running at self-selected speed. This was then followed by the yo-yo test. Groups that completed the inspiratory muscle warm-up done so between the stretching and the ground running. The results of the paper suggested that MIP increased by 8%, although this was probably gone after 15 minutes. Heart rate and RPE were similar between the trials, and following the inspiratory muscle warm-up there was a reduced rate of perceived breathlessness. The most important measure, however, was the improvement in performance, and this was that the inspiratory muscle warm-up group, compared to the control group, improved by 19% and to the placebo group 13%. The conclusion from this paper was that the specific inspiratory muscle warm-up may entail reduction in breathlessness sensation, and this is partly attributable to the enhancement of dynamic inspiratory muscle function, and this led to an improved performance. Following looking at a paper by Tong and Fu, it was apparent that the test which they completed in their research wasn't exactly sport specific. They also had a warm-up which wasn't necessarily effective for their trial. The reason we're looking at this paper is due to the aim being to examine the effects of inspiratory muscle warm-up on inspiratory muscle function, and the main reason is the fact it also looks at the maximum distance covered in a subsequent incremental badminton footwork test, therefore it was more sport specific. Participants used were 10 male badminton players, and the trial was an incremental test to assess badminton footwork, following one of 3 conditions: either a control condition, where just a badminton specific warm-up was completed; a placebo condition, where a badminton specific warm-up was completed, followed by an inspiratory muscle warm-up of 15% of their MIP, or an inspiratory muscle warm-up group, where the badminton specific warm-up was completed, followed by an inspiratory muscle warm-up at 40% of their MIP. The warm-up consisted of 5 minutes of moderate running on a treadmill at a self-selected speed, followed by 10 minutes of a stretching exercise, followed by 5 minutes of badminton footwork activity on the court at a self-selected pace. This was then followed by the incremental test. The groups that completed an inspiratory muscle warm-up done so between the stretching and the badminton footwork activity. The incremental test involved participants starting on point C. On an audio signal they have moved to P1 and then back to C, then on the next signal to P2 and back to the C, and then on the third signal they've moved to P3 and then back to the C. These points are all shown in the diagram on the slide. There was initial velocity on the test of 0.6 meters per second, and this increased by 0.1 in each level. Between each level there was a 10-second rest, and the test was terminated when both feet of the participant were 1 meter away from the centre line twice. The main outcome measure from the Linatower paper in 2007 was the distance covered in the badminton footwork assessment. As you can see from this graph and the figure shown on the right, the control group covered 1,537 metres, the placebo group covered 1,522 metres, and the inspiratory muscle warm-up group completed 1,640 minutes, which was significantly better than both the control and the placebo condition. This was also accompanied by the MIP of the inspiratory muscle warm-up group increasing by 7.8%, and the MRPD, which is the maximum rate of pressure development, increasing by 6.9% in the inspiratory muscle warm-up group. These findings suggest that the inspiratory muscle specific warm-up improved the footwork performance in the subsequent maximum incremental badminton footwork test. This improvement was partly attributable to the reduced breathlessness sensation, which is shown from the enhanced inspiratory muscle function with the two figures at the bottom of the screen. We're now going to move on to research which suggests there is no effect of an inspiratory muscle warm-up. This is due to the fact that while both previous papers suggested a standardised warm-up, this isn't the case due to the self-selected speeds involved. Therefore, the next papers have a stronger experimental design to get more accurate findings. The first of these is by Johnson et al. In 2014. Now, the aim of this research was to examine the effects of an active cycle warm-up with and without the addition of an inspiratory muscle warm-up on 10 km cycling time trial performance. 10 cyclists were used in the experiment, and the trial was a 10 km time trial following one of three conditions: either a no warm-up condition, which was the control, CYC condition, which was just a cycling warm-up, or CYC IMW, which was cycling warm-up and inspiratory muscle warm-up. The warm-up consisted of 5 minutes at 70% of the gas exchange threshold, 5 minutes at 80%, and then 5 minutes at 90%. This was followed by 2 minutes rest and then the 10 km time trial. The group that completed the inspiratory muscle warm-up done so prior to the cycling warm-up. The results of the paper suggested again that MIP increased by 8% following the inspiratory muscle warm-up, but most importantly the cycling performances. The control completed their 10 km in 14.99 minutes, the CYC group in 14.75 minutes, and the CYC IMW group in 14.7 minutes. These results show that there was an effect of the cycling warm-up, which wasn't looked into in previous studies, but also that the inspiratory muscle warm-up had no further effect on the results. This suggests that exercise modality may influence effects, as there was no effect found in this research. The findings in the paper by Johnson et al. In 2014 were that the effects from an inspiratory muscle warm-up may be sport-specific. So the reason we're looking at this paper by Arend et al. In 2015 is the fact this paper looks specifically at rowing exercises and the effects an inspiratory muscle warm-up has on it. The aim was to investigate the impact of inspiratory muscle warm-ups on sub-maximal rowing performance. 10 competitive male rowers were used, and they completed a sub-maximal rowing test following one of two conditions: either a rowing-specific warm-up or a rowing-specific warm-up and an inspiratory muscle warm-up. The rowing-specific warm-up included 6 minutes rowing at 50% of their maximal aerobic power, followed by 2 minutes rowing at 75% of their maximal aerobic power. This was then followed by the sub-maximal rowing test, which was completed at 90% of their maximal aerobic power. Now, the instruction was to complete the test for as long as possible, but no longer than 20 minutes. The group that completed the inspiratory muscle warm-up done so following the rowing warm-up. Looking at the results of this, both the time and the distance covered showed no difference between the groups. The time showed a 1.4% change and the distance a 1.3% change. This was also combined with the heart rate showing a minus 1.7% change following the inspiratory muscle warm-up, and the RER showing a 2.7% change. The only significant result following the inspiratory muscle warm-up was the breathing frequency, and this involved a 1.7% change following the inspiratory muscle warm-up. The conclusion from this paper was that the warm-up protocol of the inspiratory muscles used in this study has no influence on submaximal endurance performance in highly trained rowers, possibly suggesting that there's no effect of inspiratory muscle warm-ups.
Okay, so within the video today we've looked at papers which suggest that inspiratory muscle warm-ups are both an effective and ineffective way of optimising performance in endurance exercise. So I'll now leave it up to you to decide whether inspiratory muscle warm-ups are for you.